Heists are one of the most entertaining forms of crime ever invented, thanks to the careful planning and sneaky infiltration required for them. And naturally, I have 5 ships to discuss today that I think would be uniquely suited for use in one. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and these are the best ships for heists in Star Wars. ZH40 Tribune. First up is the Starfeld Industries ZH40 Tribune-class light freighter. Any light freighter would work fine for a heist, but the ZH40 is not just one of the best on the market in my opinion, but also has a special feature that I think would be quite useful. The 2 arms on the sides each house a pair of retractable cargo arms that would allow you to easily swoop in and pick up any cargo of the correct size and shape. Obviously there is a lot more to a heist than just grabbing something off the ground and flying away, but this ease of capture and escape is what sets the ZH40 apart from other freighters, and what all the entries on this list will focus on. After all, if you are stealing something small enough to just grab it with your hands and run up a ship's boarding ramp with it, it doesn't really matter what ship you're running to as long as it's fast. The ZH40 would be excellent for that simple of a heist, don't get me wrong, but the crane arms open some extra doors for you that a normal light freighter would not. The ship would likely have had a decent passenger capacity like most other light freighters, so the procedure for a heist with this ship would be pretty simple. Drop off your crew near the target location as casually as possible, and then fly away and wait for their signal to return. Have them find whatever it is you're stealing and bring it outside, and then come back and grab it with the external cargo arms. In this scenario, your heist crew will probably need another exit plan for themselves, but it's possible that the authorities will be too focused on chasing down the ship flying away with their stuff to notice a few pedestrians fleeing the scene on foot. You could potentially also just land to pick them up, have them wear jetpacks to jump into the loading ramp, or arrange for a shuttle to pick them up at a separate rendezvous location as well. The possibilities are endless, and really depend on the specific place you're conducting your heist at, and the situation in general. All in all though, the ZH40 would be an exceptional freighter for most heist scenarios, and a very stylish one to boot. The ZH40 measured about 35.7 meters long by 18.8 meters wide and 7.1 meters tall. It had a max speed that I would estimate to be at least 1,000 kilometers per hour, and a Class 1 hyperdrive. It could carry 85 tons of cargo internally, plus up to 2 external cargo containers, as well as probably 6 passengers and 1 or 2 months of consumables. The ship required a crew of 4 normally, but could be flown by just 1 if necessary. It was very heavily armed with at least 1 quad laser cannon turret, 1 heavy laser cannon, and 2 paired laser cannons, as well as allegedly 4 additional laser cannons that I personally still think are just antennas. With all of its weapons, engines, and equipment, it was probably on the more expensive end of the light freighter market, perhaps around 150,000 credits new or 50,000 used. Even at that price though, I think it would have been well worth it. Bellicose-class heavy lifter. Next up is the Horsch-Kessel Drive Inc. Bellicose-class heavy lifter. This was an orbital load lifter used by the Separatists to deploy assault droids during the Clone Wars, and I think it would be just as good at picking things up without permission as it was putting them down. Unfortunately, that is essentially all we know about the ship class in general. There is a little more information out there about one bellicose in particular, rogue archaeologist Dr. Aphra's Archangel, but that ship was said to have been so heavily modified that it was almost unrecognizable from its original form, so we can't necessarily trust that information. I do think that most of it probably applies to a basic bellicose, though. One of the first stories the Archangel is in involves Dr. Aphra and Darth Vader conducting a bit of a heist on Geonosis, and while the Angel isn't the ship used for it, Aphra does complain about how they should be using it, so that counts for something. I haven't read the rest of the Aphra comics, just skimmed the issues with the Archangel in them to gather reference images, but based on what I know about Aphra, there are probably other heists in this ship's history. Generally speaking, I think the best way to conduct a heist with the bellicose-class would be a simple smash and grab. Shoot out the roof of your target location with its ventral cannons, and then either grab the loot with the ship's docking clamp at the bottom of its vertical section, hop out and grab it yourself through the docking ring there, or use whatever equipment the ship had to carry and deploy battle droids if the item is too big to connect to the docking clamp. I suppose it's possible that this apparatus is something like the B-2 battle droid racks seen on the HMP droid gunship and not suitable for this purpose, but I would think something called a heavy lifter would have some kind of multi-purpose crane mechanism for moving larger droids or ground vehicles too. The only potential issue with the bellicose is its availability. It does not seem to have been a very common ship, and many Clone Wars vessels were scrapped after the war. But given its focus on utility rather than combat, I would wager that most bellicoses escaped the scrapyards and could be found on the second-hand market for a reasonable fee. The size of the bellicose is impossible to determine. Like most comic ships these days, its size and shape are infuriatingly inconsistent, and to make matters worse, one of the only times we get to see it next to ships with concrete known sizes, one or both of those ships was drawn entirely out of scale. Either Vader's J-type Nubian starship was half the size it should be, or his TIE Advanced was doubled in size. If it were to scale with the TIE, the bellicose would be around 27 meters long, and if it were to scale with the Royal Starship, it would be around 54 meters long. But putting it exactly in between gives us a pretty believable size of 40 meters long by 34 meters wide and 30 meters tall. The ship's speed was unknown, but possibly something on the order of 850 kilometers per hour, and it had a Class II hyperdrive. The Archangel was armed with 4 twin heavy laser turrets and a twin concussion missile launcher, and the base model bellicose more likely had 4 twin regular laser turrets, and only 1 missile launcher, if any. The ship required a crew of 7, a pilot, co-pilot, engineer, and 4 gunners, but it could be flown by just 1 if necessary. It could also carry 5 passengers and 3 months of consumables. Its cargo capacity is unknown, but it probably had room for 150 tons of internal cargo, and at least that much or more externally. I wouldn't be surprised if it were built to carry 1 or 2 MTTs, or 2 to 6 AATs, into battle like how the Empire used the Gozanti cruiser to carry AT-ATs, and other smaller walkers a few decades later. Finally, there is the matter of its price. The Archangel was valued at 525,000 credits, but I would guess a stock bellicose to be no more than 200,000 credits new, or 100,000 used. Rho-class shuttle. On the other side of the aisle would be the Cygnus Spaceworks Rho-class transport shuttle. This was a variant of the Republic's new class attack shuttle, extended for greater cargo capacity and utility purposes. The Rho is probably the most versatile ship on this list. In its basic form, it could be used like any other shuttle and would make for a pretty good transport to and from a heist location. However, it had the ability to latch to a large modular cargo pod, which adds several extremely useful options to choose from in planning your heist. First, the Rho had a ventral hatch to access this pod, which could be fitted with cables to deploy or extract troopers in battle with no pod attached. This could be a good way to add an element of surprise to your heist, or make a quick getaway and avoid having to land at one or both ends of the mission. The cargo pod itself could also be useful, granting you a significant amount of extra storage space for equipment for the heist, such as a land speeder or various tools, or simply more space to steal something bigger. And speaking of stealing something bigger, you could leave the cargo pod at home and use the docking clamp for it to pick up other similarly sized objects, particularly other cargo containers. Another nice thing about the Rowclass is that it was probably pretty easy to get your hands on. It was fairly common during and after the Clone Wars, and while most Republic ships were scrapped after the Clone Wars, the new and Rho-class shuttles stayed in Imperial use for quite a while afterward, and many were likely sold off when their time in service was complete rather than being destroyed. There seemed to be at least a few news floating around in the Imperial era, so it stands to reason that the even less combat-oriented Rhos would have survived as well. The Rho-class measured around 23 meters long by 30 meters wide and 23 meters tall. It had a Class 1 hyperdrive, and its top atmospheric speed was probably around 850 kilometers per hour without the cargo module, or maybe 750 with. Like the new class it was based on, it was armed with 4 dual laser cannons, and required just 2 crew. Its cargo capacity was unknown, but based on the news capacity of 2 tons, I would guess it to be 5 tons without the pod, or 100 tons with it. It also likely carried 1 week of consumables and 30 to 70 passengers. The price of the Rho is unknown as well, but it was probably around 100,000 credits new and 70,000 used, again based on the new class. CT-05. Of course, not every heist involves stealing something small enough to be carried by a typical freighter or shuttle. Some of the most lucrative things to steal are the size of a freighter or shuttle, in fact. Capital ship components, small ships or large vehicles, etc. We see such a heist conducted, from the perspective of those being heisted upon, in the first season of Ahsoka. Morgan Elsbeth's forces use a Corellian Engineering Corporation CT-05 type transport to steal a Super Star Destroyer hyperdrive core for the Eye of Sion. While we don't know almost anything about this ship, including even the official name of the class, we can observe that it would be great for stealing many bulky items. Of course, the heist on Corellia was successful primarily because the ship was already supposed to be there, but you could pull off thefts at less tightly monitored locations pretty easily with it. Imagine stealing Imperial equipment from a remote outpost, or a mining guild crawler from some backwater mining colony. Some of the best large objects to steal are found in remote and poorly defended areas, if you know where to look. And they don't even necessarily need to be remote and poorly defended, that just makes it easier. This ship is by far the most heavily armed and well-armored on this list, and could easily handle a handful of TIE fighters or other moderate threats. How you get your hands on a heavy lifter like this is unknown, but they seem to be pretty harmless and were probably for sale to any construction company willing to pay for one, if not the entire general public at large. And of course, if not, you could always conduct a heist to get one with one of the other ships on this list. The CT-05 type appeared to measure somewhere around 75 meters long by 30 meters wide and 25 meters tall. I would guess it to have a top speed of 900 kilometers per hour and a Class 2 or 3 hyperdrive. It was armed with 4 twin fire-linked laser cannons, possibly heavy laser cannons based on the size of their turrets. It was probably also equipped with a tractor beam projector to stabilize its cargo load, which was suspended below the ship on 6 enormous magnetic clamps, each connected by 8 thick cables to the ship's underside. The CT-05 type likely required a crew of 5 to 8, including a pilot, co-pilot, loadmaster, 2 to 4 gunners, and an engineer. It could probably carry 1 or 2 passengers, and at least 1 to 5,000 tons of cargo. And of course, like everything else, its price was unknown, but I would guess it to be around 300,000 credits new, or 150,000 used. Quad Jumper. And finally, one of the best ships for heists in Star Wars would be the sub-pro Tug B-13 Quadrajet Transfer Space Tug. Like the Rho-class shuttle, there are a couple different ways you could use this tiny little ship. A while ago, I suggested the Quad Jumper as one of the best getaway ships in Star Wars. It was tiny and easy to conceal, extremely common and easy to overlook, and very fast and easy to flee with. You should watch that video next for more information if you haven't already, but these qualities and more would make it the perfect transport for getting to a heist location and getting away with your loot afterward. It shouldn't be too hard to land on the roof of your heist location and sneak in to get your quarry, and then be out before anyone notices it's there. But wait, there's more. The quad jumper was equipped with both a rear towing winch and a dorsal magnetic clamp for use in hauling cargo containers around orbital freight transfer yards. Originally, the ship was given these to help unload bulk freighters and move their cargo either onto space stations for distribution, cargo barges for planetary landing, or even just straight to the planet's surface. But as you may have guessed, this would be very helpful for taking things that don't belong to you as well. The small size and innocuous nature of the quad jumper would let you infiltrate Imperial bases and other semi-sensitive facilities much more easily than you could in other ships, and then you could simply hook it up to a container holding the credits or equipment you are planning to steal and fly off with it. Better yet, though, this would make it extremely easy to steal items at a cargo hub. If the item you are trying to steal is being shipped somewhere, you could blend right in with the other transfer tugs at the hub and track it down to take it home with you. Or, if you aren't picky about what you get, you could just set up an operation near a transfer yard and skim a container or two off the top every once in a while as a little surprise loot box. I'd hardly call it a heist if you aren't stealing something specific, but it's worth considering. The quad jumper measured 7.98 meters long by about 7 meters wide and 5 tall. It had a top speed of 1,150 kilometers per hour, and at least some were outfitted with a hyperdrive, likely a Class 2 or 3. The ship was unarmed by default, though some were modified to include laser cannons. It required a crew of 1 pilot and could carry 3 passengers. The ship had next to no room for cargo internally, but could likely carry at least 10 tons of cargo externally and 3 days of consumables. Finally, its price was, as usual, unknown, but probably no more than 20,000 credits new or 10,000 used. An exceptional deal if true. Some of the containers you could steal with it may be worth that much or more. And those are the best ships for heists in Star Wars. Let me know what you think of these ships, or what you would have chosen instead in the comments. Like I said at the beginning, really any light freighter or shuttle would do, but all of these ships had some kind of interesting cargo handling feature that would give them a unique advantage in a heist situation. I considered using the Y-45 Armored Transport Hauler and the Sinar Chal Utilipede Transport, so if you have enough good suggestions to accompany them, I could definitely make a part 2 to this someday. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. RFC, out.